You're 12 months old. You're sitting on the floor, and there's a mirror in front of you. There's another child looking back at you. Same eyes, same little shirt, and it copies every move you make, almost perfectly. You reach out to touch it. Your finger hits glass, cold, flat, and the other child slips away from your reach. You smile at it. It smiles back. You have no idea that's you. You don't remember this moment. Nobody does. But it happened to almost everyone listening to this right now, and it's proof of one of the strangest gaps in the whole process of becoming who you are. Here's a number that should stop you for a second. Only about a third of children under 2 actually pass the simplest test we have for recognizing themselves in a mirror. The other 2/3 are still looking at a stranger. Picture self-awareness not as a switch, flipped on or off, but as a door. That door doesn't open for everyone at the same time. For humans, it usually swings open somewhere between 18 and 24 months. For some animals, it opens earlier than you'd expect. For a lot of others, maybe it never really closes. We've just been checking for it at the wrong door. This story starts in 1970 when psychologist Gordon Gallup Jr. did something almost embarrassingly simple. He lightly sedated a few chimpanzees, dabbed an odorless red mark on their eyebrows, somewhere they couldn't see or smell without a mirror, and set them down in front of one to watch what happened. If the animal reached up and touched the mark on its own body, instead of touching the mirror, that meant something specific. It understood the reflection was itself, not some other animal wandering into view. And that's the question this whole video is built around. What actually has to happen inside a brain before it understands that the thing staring back from a mirror is itself and not a stranger? A lot of people assume the mirror test is basically an intelligence ranking. Pass it and you're smart, fail it and you're not. That's a common misunderstanding, and it's wrong in an important way. The mirror test doesn't measure intelligence in general. It measures one narrow thing: the ability to connect a reflected image with your own body, almost entirely through sight. An animal can be remarkably intelligent and still fail this test, simply because it doesn't live in a world run by eyesight in the first place. Here's the first detail you need. In humans, this ability isn't there from birth. Newborns look into a mirror and react as if there's another baby right there, sometimes smiling at it, sometimes trying to talk to it. It's not until around 18 months that some children start pausing, reaching up to touch their own forehead when they spot the mark in the mirror, instead of touching the glass. By age 2, most children have gotten there. Your brain, the one running this exact moment, once spent almost 2 years just learning something you now treat as completely obvious. Here's the next twist. The list of species that pass this test keeps getting longer, and it doesn't stop where you'd expect it to. Chimpanzees and orangutans passed back in the 1970s. Bottlenose dolphins and Asian elephants got added to the list in the early 2000s. Even though the way they touch, the mark, looks nothing like a human hand, elephants use their trunk to probe the spot on their head, dolphins can only twist their bodies in front of the mirror to get a better look. Then in 2019, a study published in the journal PLOS Biology shook up the whole field of animal behavior science. A small fish, the cleaner wrasse, scientific name Labroides dimidiatus, was recorded scraping part of its body against the bottom of the tank trying to remove a mark it could only have seen by looking in a mirror. A fish with a brain that weighs a few dozen milligrams. Here's where you need to slow down for a second, because this is the single most speculative claim in this entire story. Not every scientist agrees that the cleaner wrasse's behavior proves genuine self-awareness in the way Gallup originally meant it. Some researchers argue it might just be a reflex, scraping at anything that looks like debris on the skin without any real sense of "that's me" attached to it. This debate is still very much alive, nowhere near settled, and anyone who tells you with total certainty that this fish is fully self-aware is getting ahead of what the evidence actually supports. Now let's bring this closer to home. Dogs and cats, the 2 species that live closer to humans than almost anything else on the planet, land almost entirely in the failed category of the mirror test. A dog can live 20 years next to a mirror and never once reach up, or rather lift a paw to touch a mark on its own forehead. Your gut instinct might say that means a dog is somehow less intelligent than an elephant or a fish. This is exactly where the mirror test might have been asking the wrong question from the very beginning. Dogs, and most carnivorous mammals, don't live in a world dominated by sight. They live in a world dominated by scent. A dog's nose can distinguish tens of millions of different odors, while its eyes, compared to human eyes, are relatively poor at picking up fine detail and color. Expecting a dog to recognize itself through a reflected image is a bit like expecting someone who's colorblind to pass a test built entirely around distinguishing shades of red from green. It doesn't measure the subject's real ability. It only measures whether the subject happens to match the tool being used to measure it. In 2016, animal behavior researcher Alexandra Horowitz at Columbia University designed a different version of the test, something she called the sniff test of self-recognition. Instead of a mirror and a dab of color, she had dogs sniff a series of urine samples, including their own, another dog's, and crucially, their own sample with an unfamiliar scent added to it. The dogs spent noticeably more time sniffing their own altered sample than their own unaltered one, as if they'd picked up on something being off about their own scent. In other words, dogs may well have a form of self-recognition. It's just written in the language of the nose, not the eyes, and for almost 50 years, the mirror test never once spoke that language. And that's the reversal this whole video has been building toward. What we used to call the failure of dogs and cats might not be a failure of self-awareness at all. It might be a failure of the test, one that was never smart enough to notice self-awareness when it showed up in a different form. The cost was never sitting with the animal. The cost was sitting with how humans chose to define what it means to know yourself, which brings you right back to that 12-month-old in front of the mirror. The moment that child touches the glass instead of touching their own forehead isn't a failure of intelligence. It's just a door that hasn't opened yet, the same way a dog's door might never open the way humans picture it because it's waiting to be opened with a completely different key, one made of scent instead of reflected light. You don't remember the day you first realized the person in the mirror was you. Nobody does. It's one of the most important moments in the entire process of becoming a self-aware individual, and it happened quietly, with no ceremony, with nobody deliberately filming it so you could watch it back later. So the real question was never which animal is smarter than which. The real question is this: if even you needed almost 2 full years to learn how to recognize yourself, how confident should you really be when you judge a dog, a cat, or a fish just because it doesn't see itself the way you see yourself? Next time you're standing in front of a mirror, try to remember, even though you know you can't, what that very first moment actually felt like. And ask yourself which part of you is still, right now, waiting for the right kind of mirror, one that could finally let it see itself too.